Hi there. I'm Darlene Matthews and I'm 53 years old. Tonight was supposed to be perfect. 25 years of marriage and Robert and I were celebrating at the Sterling Room, the same restaurant where we had our first date. I'd been feeling like something was off lately, but I pushed those thoughts away. This was our night. I'd even bought him an expensive anniversary gift, hoping it might bring us closer again. Little did I know that our romantic evening was about to take a turn I never could have imagined. Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that will absolutely shock you. Trust me, you won't believe what happens when an uninvited guest crashes our anniversary dinner. Let me take you back to the beginning so you understand how we got to that fateful evening. Robert and I met 26 years ago when I was already building my consulting business here in Denver. He was a struggling real estate agent back then, charming and ambitious, but not particularly successful. I was the one with the steady income, the business connections, and honestly, the financial stability. Over the years, while Robert found his footing in real estate, I grew my consulting firm into something really special. We built a beautiful life together in Cherry Creek, bought a stunning home worth about $1.2 million, and accumulated what most people would consider substantial assets. We never had children, which was a mutual decision that allowed us both to focus on our careers and enjoy our freedom. But these past few months, something had shifted. Robert started coming home later, claiming he had more client dinners than usual. He'd bought a gym membership out of nowhere, started wearing a new cologne that I definitely hadn't purchased for him, and his phone had suddenly become this sacred object that he clutched like his life depended on it. When I'd walk into a room while he was texting, he'd quickly flip it face down or slip it into his pocket. The signs were all there, weren't they? But after 25 years together, you want to believe in your partner. You want to trust that the person you've shared your life with wouldn't betray that bond. Still, my instincts kept nagging at me, and I've learned over the years to trust my gut when it comes to business decisions. I figured it was time to apply that same logic to my personal life. 3 weeks before our anniversary, I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a private investigator named Tom Bradley, a former police detective who specialized in matrimonial investigations. I gave him Robert's schedule, his usual haunts, and asked him to document whatever he found. Tom assured me he'd have a comprehensive report ready soon, but as our anniversary approached, I still hadn't heard back from him. That evening, I chose my outfit carefully. A sleek black dress that I knew Robert loved, my grandmother's pearl necklace, and the diamond earrings he'd given me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look beautiful for him, hoping that maybe I was wrong about everything. Maybe we could recapture what we lost somewhere along the way. I arrived at the Sterling Room 15 minutes early, just as I always do for important occasions. The hostess, a young woman named Sarah, who'd seated us many times before, greeted me warmly and led me to our usual table by the window overlooking the city lights. The restaurant was bustling with the typical Friday evening crowd, couples celebrating anniversaries and birthdays, business associates closing deals over expensive wine. I ordered a glass of their finest Cabernet and settled in to wait for Robert. The familiar sounds of clinking glasses, soft jazz music, and quiet conversations filled the space around me. This place held so many memories for us. Our first date when Robert was so nervous he spilled wine on his tie. Our 5th anniversary when he surprised me with a weekend trip to Aspen. Our 15th when we talked about maybe renewing our vows. Sitting there sipping my wine and watching other couples enjoy their evenings, I felt a mixture of hope and dread. Part of me wanted to believe that tonight could be a fresh start for us, a chance to reconnect and move past whatever rough patch we'd been going through. But another part of me, the practical businesswoman who'd built her success on reading people and situations, accurately knew that something fundamental had changed in our relationship. Robert finally walked through the restaurant doors at 7:45, a full 30 minutes after our reservation time. I watched him scan the dining room until his eyes found mine, and even from across the restaurant I could see the tension in his shoulders. He looked handsome as always, in his charcoal gray suit and blue tie, but there was something different about his demeanor. He seemed nervous, almost jumpy, as he made his way to our table. "Sorry I'm late, honey," he said, leaning down to give me a quick kiss on the cheek. That's when I caught the scent of an unfamiliar perfume clinging to his collar, something floral and sweet that definitely wasn't any fragrance I owned. And there, just barely visible on the edge of his white shirt collar, was the faintest trace of lipstick in a shade of coral pink that I'd never worn in my life. Traffic was terrible on I-25. He continued settling into his chair across from me, but his explanation didn't quite ring true. Robert knew the Denver traffic patterns better than almost anyone after 15 years in real estate. He could navigate this city in his sleep and avoid the worst congestion without breaking a sweat. He immediately flagged down our waiter Marcus, whom we'd known for years. "Could we get a bottle of your best Bordeaux?" he asked, his voice just a little too loud, a little too eager. "We're celebrating our 25th anniversary tonight." It felt like overcompensation, the way someone acts when they're trying too hard to appear normal. I studied his face as Marcus congratulated us and went to fetch the wine. Robert's usually steady hands had the slightest tremor as he unfolded his napkin, and he kept glancing at his phone, which he'd placed face down on the table between us. Every few minutes, the screen would light up with what I assume were incoming text messages, and each time it happened, his jaw would tighten almost imperceptibly. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, making an obvious effort to focus on me. "That dress is perfect on you." But even his compliments felt rehearsed, like he was going through the motions of being a loving husband without his heart really being in it. When Marcus returned with the wine and went through the tasting ritual, Robert barely paid attention. He nodded distractedly at whatever Marcus was saying about the vintage and vineyard, then immediately drained half his glass the moment it was poured. I'd been married to this man for 25 years, and I'd never seen him drink wine like he was trying to calm his nerves. "I have something special for you," I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out the elegantly wrapped box I'd been excited to give him all week. Inside was a custom Rolex Submariner that I'd had engraved with our wedding date and the words 25 years strong. It had cost me $8,000, but I wanted this anniversary to be memorable. Robert's reaction wasn't what I'd hoped for. Instead of the joy and surprise I'd expected, he looked almost uncomfortable as he opened the box. "Darlene, wow, this is really expensive," he said, his voice strained. "You shouldn't have spent this much money." He held the watch uncertainly, as if he wasn't sure he deserved such an extravagant gift. "You're worth it," I replied, though his response had stung a little. "We've built a good life together, and I wanted to commemorate that." I waited for him to put the watch on to show some genuine enthusiasm, but he just closed the box and set it aside with a mumbled thank you. We ordered our appetizers, the same dishes we always chose at the Sterling Room. Oysters Rockefeller for him, the burrata for me. But our conversation felt stilted and forced. I tried to bring up plans for the future, maybe that trip to Italy we'd been talking about for years, or the possibility of expanding my consulting business to include international clients. "That sounds great," Robert would say, but his responses were distracted automatic. He kept checking his phone, and each time it lit up with another message, he seemed to grow more agitated. Finally, I decided to test the waters. "You know, Robert, I've been thinking we should probably update our wills and financial documents. It's been years since we've reviewed everything." I watched his face carefully as I continued. "I even hired someone to help me organize our assets and make sure everything's properly documented." The effect was immediate and telling. Robert's wine glass slipped in his hand, and he had to catch it before the contents spilled across the white tablecloth. "What do you mean you hired someone?" he asked, and for the first time all evening, I had his complete attention. "Oh, just a consultant to help with financial planning," I said casually, taking a sip of my wine. You know how thorough I like to be with these things. But the damage was done. The color had drained from Robert's face, and I could see him trying to calculate exactly what kind of consultant I might have hired and what they might have discovered. Just as Marcus was clearing our appetizer plates and we were preparing for the main course, I noticed a commotion near the restaurant's entrance. A young woman had walked in, and she was impossible to miss. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with long auburn hair styled in perfect waves, wearing a form-fitting red dress that accentuated her very obviously pregnant belly. She was probably about 6 months along, and she carried herself with the kind of confident stride that suggested she knew exactly where she was going. What struck me most was her smile. It was bright, almost radiant, the kind of expression you see on someone who's about to deliver what they believe is wonderful news. She paused at the hostess stand, said something to Sarah, and then began scanning the dining room with purpose. That's when I felt Robert go completely rigid beside me. I followed his gaze and realized with growing horror that this woman wasn't just randomly looking around the restaurant. She was looking for someone specific. She was looking for us. Our eyes met across the crowded dining room, and her smile grew even brighter. She placed one hand protectively over her rounded belly and began walking directly toward our table, weaving between other diners with the determination of someone on a mission. "Oh, God," Robert whispered under his breath, and I heard his wineglass clink against his wedding ring as his hand began to shake. The woman approached our table with the confidence of someone who belonged there, someone who had every right to interrupt our anniversary dinner. She was prettier than I'd expected, with clear blue eyes and the kind of glowing skin that pregnant women sometimes have. Her red dress was expensive, probably designer, and her jewelry caught the restaurant's soft lighting as she moved. "Robert, honey," she said in a voice loud enough for the tables around us to hear clearly. "I couldn't wait any longer. I just had to come and share our wonderful news with your wife." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to remain perfectly still, my face carefully composed, even as my world began to tilt sideways. Around us, I could sense other diners turning in their chairs, their conversations trailing off as they realized they were witnessing some kind of domestic drama unfold. "This is Jessica," Robert managed to croak out, though he looked like he might be sick. "Darlene, I'm Jessica Morrison," the woman said, extending her hand to me with that same brilliant smile, as if we were being introduced at a perfectly normal social gathering. "And I'm carrying Robert's baby. We're due in 3 months." She settled herself into the empty chair at our table without being invited, signaling Marcus for attention. "Could I get some sparkling water with lime?" she asked cheerfully. "The baby's been making me so thirsty lately." The restaurant seemed to have gone completely quiet around us, though I knew that was probably just my perception. My ears were ringing, and I felt like I was watching this scene unfold from somewhere outside my own body. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not tonight, not on our 25th anniversary. But Jessica's presence was undeniably real, as was the obvious swell of her pregnancy and the casual way she just announced that my husband was the father of her child. Jessica seemed completely comfortable with the situation, acting as though crashing our anniversary dinner was the most natural thing in the world. She settled back in her chair and began talking with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting a long time to have this conversation. "Robert's told me so much about you, Darlene," she said, her voice warm and friendly, as if we were old friends catching up. "He says you're incredibly successful with your consulting business. I think it's wonderful when women can build something of their own, don't you?" I managed to nod, still processing the surreal nature of this moment. Around us, I could see other diners stealing glances at our table, some holding up phones as if they might be recording this bizarre scene. "We've been together for 8 months now," Jessica continued, one hand resting protectively on her belly. "Robert's been such a wonderful support during the pregnancy. He found me the most adorable apartment in Lodo. You know the area, all those converted warehouses with the exposed brick. It's perfect for a nursery." Each word felt like another small knife wound, but I kept my expression neutral, drawing on years of business negotiations where showing emotion would have been a sign of weakness. "He's been helping me pick out everything for the baby's room," Jessica went on. "We found the most beautiful crib at that boutique on South Broadway." Solid cherry wood cost about $3,000, but Robert insisted on the best for our little one. She patted her stomach affectionately. We're thinking about names too. If it's a boy, maybe Robert Jr. If it's a girl, perhaps something classic like Elizabeth or Catherine. Robert sat frozen in his chair, saying nothing, his face a mask of misery and guilt. I wondered how long he'd been planning to tell me about this, or if he'd been planning to tell me at all. The apartment rent is $2,800 a month, Jessica continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension at the table. Robert takes care of that plus my car payment. Did you know he bought me a BMW? It's the cutest little SUV, perfect for car seats and diaper bags. She laughed, a sound that would have been charming under different circumstances. Marcus approached with her sparkling water, clearly sensing the awkwardness but too professional to comment. Jessica thanked him warmly and took a long sip before continuing her monologue. Robert's been so generous with everything. Last month he took me to that jewelry store in Cherry Creek Mall. You know, the one he bought me these gorgeous diamond earrings for my birthday. She turned her head to show me the substantial studs sparkling in her ears. And this engagement ring, she added, extending her left hand to display a sizable solitaire diamond. He proposed just 2 weeks ago, right after we found out the baby's gender. I felt something cold settle in the pit of my stomach. Not just anger or hurt, but a calculating awareness of what Jessica's casual mentions of rent payments, car payments, expensive jewelry, and furniture purchases actually meant. Robert had been spending our money from accounts we shared, money I'd earned through years of building my business to support his pregnant mistress and their future child. Of course, once Robert leaves you and we get married, we'll need a bigger place, Jessica said, her tone still conversational, but with an edge of expectation now. Something in a good school district, maybe one of those new developments in Highlands Ranch. Robert says you two have quite a bit saved up, and with your business doing so well, the transition should be pretty smooth financially. She leaned forward slightly, her blue eyes bright with anticipation. I've already been looking at some places online. There's this gorgeous 4-bedroom house that just went on the market. It's got a 3-car garage and one of those open floor plans that's perfect for entertaining. The listing price is only $850,000, which seems reasonable considering what Robert tells me about your assets. I realized with crystalline clarity that Jessica hadn't just stumbled into a relationship with my husband. She targeted him, researched our financial situation, and was now positioning herself to claim as much of our wealth as possible. The casual way she discussed our private finances, the detailed plans she'd already made, the expensive purchases Robert had been making for her, it all painted a picture of a calculated campaign to infiltrate and ultimately destroy my marriage for financial gain. Around us, the restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of other diners, but our table had become its own little island of drama. I could feel the weight of curious stares, the whispered speculation about what was unfolding before their eyes. Jessica pulled out her phone and began scrolling through photos. Would you like to see the ultrasound pictures? She asked brightly. The baby looks just like Robert already. Same nose, same chin. The doctor says everything looks perfect. I had listened to enough. The time for shock and passive observation was over. I set down my wine glass with deliberate precision and looked directly at Jessica, my voice calm and measured when I finally spoke. Jessica, you seem to have done quite a bit of research about our marriage and our finances, I said, noting how her confident smile flickered just slightly at my composed tone. But I'm curious. Did Robert happen to mention how our assets are actually structured? Robert's eyes widened in what looked like growing panic, but I kept my focus on Jessica, who was still radiating that self-assured confidence. Well, I know you have that beautiful house in Cherry Creek, Jessica replied, her hand moving to rest on her belly again. Robert showed me pictures. It's worth over $1 million, isn't it? And your consulting business, he mentioned, it's valued at around $800,000, plus all those investment accounts and his real estate commissions over the years. I nodded thoughtfully, reaching into my purse. You've certainly been thorough in your planning. I pulled out a leather portfolio that I'd brought with me tonight, something I'd honestly hoped I wouldn't need to use. But there's something important that Robert apparently failed to share with you. Jessica's expression shifted slightly, the first crack in her confident facade. What do you mean? Before Robert and I married 25 years ago, I required him to sign a prenuptial agreement, I said quietly, placing the leather portfolio on the table between us. At the time, you see, I was already a successful consultant with significant assets, while Robert was just starting out in real estate and had very little to his name. The color began to drain from Jessica's face, but she tried to maintain her composure. Prenups can be challenged in court, she said, though her voice had lost some of its earlier certainty. They can be if they're improperly drafted or signed under duress, I agreed. But this one was prepared by one of Denver's top matrimonial attorneys, with both parties having independent legal representation. Robert had 2 weeks to review it with his own lawyer before signing. I opened the portfolio and removed several documents, spreading them on the table where both Jessica and Robert could see them clearly. According to the terms of our prenuptial agreement, all assets that either party brought into the marriage remain separate property. Any assets acquired during the marriage through inheritance or business ownership by one party also remain separate property. Jessica was staring at the documents, now her earlier confidence evaporating as she tried to process what I was telling her. The house you've been admiring, I purchased it 3 years into our marriage with proceeds from my consulting business, which means it's my separate property. The investment accounts you mentioned also funded primarily through my business income over the years, making them separate property as well. Robert looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, but I wasn't finished. Robert is entitled to exactly 50% of any assets we acquired jointly during our marriage. I continued, my voice remaining calm and professional. Those assets consist primarily of his real estate commissions, minus business expenses, and the appreciation on his portion of our joint savings account. I pulled out a calculator and began showing Jessica the actual numbers. Over 25 years, Robert's net contributions to our marital assets total approximately $200,000. That's what he would be entitled to in a divorce settlement. The transformation in Jessica's face was remarkable to watch. The confident, glowing, expectant mother had been replaced by someone doing rapid mental calculations and clearly not liking the results. 200,000, she repeated, her voice smaller now. But the house, your business, the investment accounts, all mine, I confirmed. Every single dollar of them. The revelation of the prenuptial agreement had clearly shaken Jessica, but she wasn't ready to give up entirely. I could see her mind working, trying to find some angle, some way to salvage her plans. But Robert's been supporting me, she said, her voice taking on a slightly desperate edge. The apartment, my car, all the things for the baby. He's been paying for everything with your joint money. Yes, he has, I agreed, reaching for another document from my portfolio. Which brings us to this. I placed a detailed financial report on the table, the one my private investigator had finally delivered to me just that afternoon. This is a comprehensive accounting of every unauthorized expenditure Robert has made from our joint accounts over the past 8 months. Jessica's eyes widened as she saw the itemized list apartment rent payments totaling $22,400 BMW lease payments of $6,800 jewelry purchases amounting to $15,000 furniture and baby items adding up to $12,000 restaurant bills, hotel charges, and dozens of other expenses. The total comes to $67,300, I said, letting that number sink in. Money taken from accounts that I contribute to through my business income used to support Robert's extramarital relationship without my knowledge or consent. Robert finally found his voice. Darlene, please let me explain. Explain what, Robert? How you've been stealing from our marriage to build a life with another woman, how you've been lying to me for 8 months while planning to abandon our 25-year marriage. My voice remained steady, but there was steel in it now. Jessica was frantically scrolling through her phone, probably calculating her own expenses, and realizing how quickly her comfortable lifestyle would evaporate If Robert only had access to $200,000. In filing for divorce, I'll be seeking full reimbursement of those unauthorized expenditures, I continued, which means Robert's actual share of our marital assets will be closer to $130,000, assuming the court doesn't award me additional damages for his breach of fiduciary duty. The restaurant around us had grown noticeably quieter. Other diners were openly staring now, some holding up phones to record this public dissolution of a marriage. The manager, a distinguished gentleman in his 50s, approached our table cautiously. "Is everything all right here?" he asked diplomatically, though it was obvious that everything was very much not all right. Jessica suddenly stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous," she declared, though her voice was shaking now. "Robert, you told me you were wealthy. You showed me your house, your cars, your lifestyle. You said we'd be financially secure." "Jessica, please sit down," Robert pleaded. "We can work this out." "Work this out." Jessica's voice was rising now, drawing attention from across the dining room. "With $100,000, do you have any idea how much it costs to raise a child? How much childcare costs, college tuition?" She turned to me, her earlier friendliness completely gone. "You're being vindictive and cruel. This baby deserves financial security. This baby deserves a father who doesn't lie and steal to support his family," I replied calmly. "But that's between you and Robert to figure out. I'm simply protecting assets that I worked 25 years to build." Jessica grabbed her purse and stood up fully, her face flushed with anger and what I suspected was growing panic about her future prospects. "This isn't over," she said, though it sounded more like wishful thinking than a real threat. "Actually, it is," I said, pulling out one final document. "I had divorce papers filed this afternoon. Robert should expect to be served within the next 48 hours. The look of absolute devastation on Robert's face might have moved me once, but not tonight. Not after everything I'd learned about his deception, his betrayal, and his willingness to jeopardize our entire life together for a woman who was clearly more interested in our bank account than in him. Jessica stormed out of the restaurant, her red dress a blur of color as she pushed past other tables, leaving a trail of whispered conversations and raised eyebrows in her wake. The dramatic exit she'd probably envisioned for tonight had turned into a humiliating retreat. Robert sat slumped in his chair staring at the divorce papers. "Darlene, please. Can't we talk about this privately?" I signaled Marcus for the check. "I think we've said everything that needs saying, don't you?" I pulled out my credit card, the one connected to my business account that Robert had never had access to. 25 years, Robert. I gave you 25 years of my life, and this is how you chose to end it. As I signed the check and left a generous tip for Marcus, who'd witnessed this entire debacle with professional discretion, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. For months, I'd been questioning my instincts, wondering if I was being paranoid or overly suspicious. Now I knew the truth, and the truth, however painful, had set me free. 6 months have passed since that devastating anniversary dinner, and I'm sitting here in my home office looking out at the Denver skyline through windows that belong entirely to me, reflecting on how dramatically my life has changed. The divorce was finalized within 3 months, just as I'd predicted. Robert's attorney tried to challenge the prenuptial agreement, but it held up perfectly under scrutiny. 25 years ago, when I'd insisted on that prenup, some friends had called me cold and calculating. Today, I call it the smartest decision I ever made. Robert received exactly what he was entitled to under our agreement, his share of the jointly acquired assets, minus the $67,000 he'd spent on Jessica, plus court costs and attorney fees. He walked away with about $95,000, and the harsh reality that his real estate income alone wasn't enough to support the lifestyle he'd been promising Jessica. Their relationship didn't survive the month. I heard through mutual friends that Jessica moved back in with her parents in Colorado Springs when she realized that Robert couldn't provide the financial security she'd expected. The baby was born in February, a little girl they named Emma. Robert pays child support, of course, but it's a far cry from the luxurious life Jessica had envisioned. As for Robert himself, he's renting a modest apartment in Lakewood and driving a 10-year-old Honda instead of the BMW he used to lease through our joint account. I occasionally see updates about his life through our former mutual friends, and while I don't wish him harm, I can't say I feel particularly sorry for him either. Actions have consequences, and he made his choices with full knowledge of what he was risking. My own life has flourished in ways I never expected. Without the stress of a deteriorating marriage hanging over me, my consulting business has expanded dramatically. I've taken on 3 major international clients, traveled to London, Tokyo, and Sydney for business, and increased my annual revenue by 40%. It turns out that when you're not constantly wondering if your spouse is being faithful, you have a lot more mental energy to devote to your career. But the changes go far beyond professional success. I joined a hiking group that explores Colorado's beautiful mountain trails every weekend. The physical activity and fresh air have been incredibly healing, and I've made genuine friendships with people who appreciate my independence and strength, rather than seeing them as threats to their ego. I've also started dating again, something I never thought I'd be ready to do. His name is Marcus. He's a successful architect who designs sustainable buildings, and he's 56 years old with grown children who live in California. What I appreciate most about Marcus is that he admires my business acumen and financial independence. He's never once suggested that I should slow down or scale back my career. Instead, he encourages my ambitions and celebrates my successes. We're taking things slowly, which feels right at this stage of my life. I'm not looking to rush into anything serious, and Marcus understands that. We enjoy dinners at restaurants where I don't have to worry about surprise visitors, weekend trips to Aspen and Vail, and long conversations about architecture and business and travel. It's comfortable and genuine in a way that I realize my marriage with Robert hadn't been for years. The most important lesson I've learned through all of this is about the value of trusting your instincts. For months before that anniversary dinner, I knew something was wrong, but I kept talking myself out of my suspicions. I kept making excuses for Robert's behavior, giving him the benefit of the doubt, hoping that my fears were unfounded. If I'd acted on my instincts sooner, I could have saved myself months of anxiety and self-doubt. I've also learned about the importance of financial independence, something my mother tried to teach me years ago, but that I didn't fully appreciate until I needed it. Having my own money, my own business, my own assets meant that Robert's betrayal, while emotionally devastating, couldn't destroy my life. I didn't have to choose between staying in a broken marriage for financial security or leaving and facing economic hardship. I had the freedom to choose what was best for my emotional and mental health because I wasn't dependent on anyone else for my financial well-being. There are moments, I'll admit, when I feel sad about the years we lost, the trust that was broken, the family we never built together. 25 years is a long time, and there were genuinely happy periods in our marriage. But I've come to understand that mourning what was lost doesn't mean regretting what I've gained. My new life, while different from what I'd planned, is richer and more authentic than what I had before. I've learned to value honesty over harmony, truth over temporary peace. I'd rather face an uncomfortable reality than live in a comfortable lie. That anniversary dinner, as humiliating and painful as it was, gave me the gift of clarity. It showed me exactly who Robert really was and what our marriage had actually become, rather than what I'd been pretending it still was. The prenuptial agreement that saved my financial life wasn't just a legal document, it was a symbol of my commitment to protecting my own interests and well-being. Some people might call that selfish, but I've learned that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's essential. You can't build a healthy relationship with someone else if you haven't first established healthy boundaries for yourself. Looking back, I can see that Jessica actually did me a favor by crashing our anniversary dinner. If she hadn't been so bold, so confident in her assumed victory, I might have discovered Robert's affair in some other way, maybe through private investigator reports, or bank statements, or suspicious phone bills. But her dramatic appearance that night, her casual discussion of their shared future, and their plans for my assets, crystallized everything in a way that made my path forward absolutely clear. I don't harbor anger toward either of them anymore. Anger is exhausting, and I have too many exciting things happening in my life to waste energy on resentment. Robert made his choice, and he's living with the consequences. Jessica learned a hard lesson about the difference between someone's lifestyle and someone's actual wealth. And I learned that sometimes the most painful experiences in life can lead to the most profound growth and freedom. Today, as I prepare for a business trip to Vancouver next week and a hiking expedition in Rocky Mountain National Park this weekend, I feel more like myself than I have in years. I'm not half of a couple anymore. I'm not someone's wife. I'm not trying to maintain a relationship that required me to ignore my instincts and compromise my values. I'm just Darlene, 53 years old, financially secure, emotionally healthy, and open to whatever adventures life has in store for me. The woman who sat in that restaurant 6 months ago, hoping her marriage could be saved, seems like a different person now. She was still looking for external validation, still trying to fix something that was fundamentally broken, still believing that love meant accepting unacceptable behavior. The woman I am now knows better. Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the courage to face the truth, even when the truth is painful. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for your future self is to refuse to accept less than you deserve in the present. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from something you've invested years in building, if that something no longer serves your highest good. Life has a funny way of putting exactly the right challenges in front of you at exactly the right time to teach you exactly the lessons you need to learn. That anniversary dinner was mine, and I'm grateful for every difficult, humiliating, enlightening moment of it. What about you? Have you ever had a moment that completely changed your perspective on your life or your relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of trusting your instincts and protecting your independence. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges and finding strength you didn't know you had. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that no matter what challenges you're facing, you have more strength and resilience than you realize. Trust yourself, protect your interests, and never be afraid to choose your own happiness over someone else's expectations. Life is too short and too precious to spend it settling for less than you deserve. Here's to new beginnings, hard-won wisdom, and the courage to build the life you truly want.